Hello and welcome to my Summative assessment project video. Today I'll be talking about the topic of computers, specifically how to build one. This is a skill that, while may not exactly be important to others, it is quite handy to have and know how to do. The biggest reason or motivation towards building your own computer is that it's cost effective, with the key focus on that you'll get the most performance for how much money is spent on your computer. In market and stores today, the computers being sold are slapped together with the idea of making the most cash from unaware customers. Typically, a $400 custom-made computer can perform just as good as an $800 market-sold computers from stores that are selling pre-made computers. I'll be teaching you guys the Lego pieces that combined together becomes the computer that many of us is familiar with. Starting off, we have the motherboard. This hardware piece is like the skull or empty head of the computer that is like the connection towards all other pieces, the foundation basically. Next is the CPU. It is the brain of the computer. It does all of the processing that is needed. And then there is the graphic processing unit or graphics card that does most of the video or graphical rendering that we see on our screen, and it's mostly helpful for video games basically, or video editing, image editing. Then we have the RAM, which is like the working memory of your computer that can store information that once you turn off your computer it disappears basically, and it's not saved. The CPU is using it to move back and forth with information. We have the power supply unit that powers up the whole computer. It's like the blood that runs in our head and giving us energy to do everything and be alive. Then there is the hard disk drive or the solid state drive in the computer, which stores memory for long-term memory. And depending on which one you get, the solid state drive being the better type would be able to transfer your long-term memories much faster compared to the hard disk drive. Next we have the case, which pretty much houses everything together and holds it all inside of a safe environment. Inside of the case there is fans that keep the CPU, the graphics card, and the computer itself cooled down so that it doesn't overheat as you're using it. Putting together the computer would require all of these hardware pieces to be gathered together, and the person putting it together must understand where each piece goes. The motherboard is needed to be connected to the case. There will be screw holes which align with the motherboard and the case, and once the motherboard is screwed into place, the next step can go a variety of ways. It is not required to put together the computer strictly following these steps. One important fact that is depending on the motherboard is that not all types of CPU can fit into it. Thus, researching and knowing which CPU works with which motherboard would be good to do prior to purchasing the hardware parts. Next focus is connecting the CPU with the motherboard, and then the CPU fan that either came with it or a custom bought one. The fan is needed so that the CPU does not overheat while the computer is on, since a lot of energy is being used while our computers are on. Heat can easily build up, making it necessary for fans to be included in the computer so that it can regulate itself. After the CPU is connected, the next step is lining up the RAM and connecting it towards the dedicated RAM slots found on the motherboard. It is a bit simpler compared to the CPU connection, where the person needs to exert a good amount of strength towards pushing the RAM into the slots until it clicks in. The next step is putting in the graphic processing unit or graphics card, which almost always connect to the PCI Express slot of the motherboard. There will be some steps toward unscrewing some parts in the case of the computer to allow the GPU to slide in, which is similar towards the RAM process. There may or may not be a click to lock the hardware into the motherboard. Afterwards, with the hard disk drive and or solid state drives, since the computer is not limited to having multiple of these hardware pieces, the person will need to place the drives in the area of the case that was made to keep them there. The next part comes towards the power supply unit, where the person will need to connect the power supply in the area of the case dedicated for it, screwing in the drive with the case so that it stays in the area. And then the fun part comes next, where the person needs to correctly wire the power supply unit to the motherboard, hard disk drives, or the solid state drive, graphics card, and whichever else that might require power. After connecting any other wires from fans to motherboard, the hard disk drive and or solid state drive, confirming everything is in place, we need to test the computer by connecting it to an outlet and turning it on. If it works, then everything should be turned on, the fans and everything. Once confirmed, then you're done and enjoy your new computer. The biggest part though is that you'll need to purchase the operating system, which is like Windows or Apple OS. And once you install it, then your computer will be working like every other computer.